The sun was setting on Costello. He was miles from his comfortable hotel and drunk. He began to notice murals throughout Seattle that hadn't been enhanced by other artists. So many pieces of art in Los Angeles had evolved over time. Some of the new layers of paint added a sense of community, while others screamed vengeance. You can be the richest son of a bitch in the city of angels, but nothing can hide the culture etched into the concrete. We are primitive. Costello just seemed to be on a path on this northern journey that was hiding the culture he craved. He continued further from his headquarters, almost as if he sensed his cast of characters were waiting for him upon return. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through an old text thread with Jenna's mom while he tipped over his flask and found it dry. Jenna's mother never gave him their address, but he thought, who knows? Maybe she unknowingly shared her location. He tapped her name, tapped info, and boom, pay dirt. He was within blocks of their home. Clearly in no condition to pop in, he settled for a glimpse of her presence. Call for an Uber, find a liquor store, and set coordinates for what could be Costello's legend. He'd been rather frugal with his per diem, so he decided to splurge on the Uber. A Mercedes pulled up, obnoxiously blaring Notorious B.I.G. Costello was a fan, but Derek in the backwards Seahawks hat driving the E-Class threw a bit of a damper on Juicy for some reason. No turning back now. Slide into those leather seats and get to the liquor store. Derek starts in with the strip club pitch. Costello picks up on this with the quickness. Find me a liquor store where I can get a small bottle of tequila, please. Then we're going to just park for a few. We good? Costello told Derek. Derek gives one more effort. I can have you in two of the finest clubs in 5 minutes. No cover, no drink minimum. Just point to my ride and tell them Derek recommended you. Derek, you seem alright, guy. I hate your hat, but I'd like to sit in this beautiful piece of machinery and top off my buzz while I get a look at the house where I grew up. Costello responded. Costello knew two things. Derek clearly has a side hustle dropping fellas off at clubs, so probably going to have to hand over some cash, and he wouldn't appreciate knowing Costello was borderline stalking someone. Derek figured out a way to surge the price and found every signal he could on the way to a liquor store. Costello got a small bottle of decent tequila and a box of Mike and Ike's. They drove to Jenna's parents' address and parked. Derek was more talkative than Costello would have preferred. Of course, he rattles off the obvious question. So this is where you grew up, huh? Costello was locked in on goat waltzing, and it dawned on him as soon as Derek asked about the house. Costello was violating his own rules if he turned this into a bullshit session. But was he really goat waltzing anymore? Costello had become quite a linguist while bartending. Years of watching people lie to one another. Observing the human instinct to swallow up another person's being through words. Men, women, non-binary. It's all one long hunting season. Costello knew how to evade the predator. He redirected the conversation. Have you ever been to therapy? Costello asks him. Bro, I drive an E-Class, and my phone is loaded with dancers' numbers. Do I look like I need therapy? Derek responds. Costello gathers himself just enough to hold back an eye roll and says, That's a great point, bro. A turbo diesel, no less. Don't think I didn't notice. You want to hear about some of my sessions? I had a doctor recommend I see one, and I had some wild conversations. Derek responds, Aren't those conversations like legally private or something? Costello has a massive internal laugh and says, Totally. But she was really hot. Derek turns down the stereo and suddenly his interest is piqued. Costello has one eye on him and the other on the house. He sees the few lights on, but nobody seems to be stirring. He'd give anything just to see Jenna pass by a window. Derek fucks all that up with a reminder he's charging surge pricing. Everything with this guy was boiled down to dollars and cents. Costello pulls out $40 and asks Derek if he could kill the surge pricing, because why let Uber make all that money when he could just take the cash? Derek taps the screen of the phone on his dash and nods in approval. Costello pops a red Mike and Ike in his mouth and says, "You're going to love this story." He digs up a memory from one of his sessions. Costello was having full-blown delusions during his first few sessions. His guests were in full color, and the videos revealed a very draconian side of him. He'd become so jaded he couldn't stand the basic pacifiers of social media that were becoming commonplace with society. Costello rattled off, "So I tell my therapist I'm building a time machine. She says my persecution complex is affecting me. I tell her I need to go back in time to tell everyone they will eventually be taking photographs of themselves and sharing them on a global computer network. Then she tells me I'm suffering a God complex. So I ask her if she has a solution for these emotions, and she just asks me to tell her more. I ask her if she's ever built a time machine before. You see, Derek, if you want to control a conversation, always ask a question of someone looking for a statement, and fire off a statement to those seeking a question. She tells me time machines don't exist. I tell her that may be true, but my desire to build one does. The existential desire for existence shifts the narrative. She refers back to my God complex. So I tell her God doesn't exist either, but we could build one of those if she wanted." Derek stared at Costello and said, "Then what did she say?" Costello grinned at Derek and said, "Nothing. She sent me to a psychiatrist for a truckload of medication." Derek reluctantly smiles and asked Costello for some Mike and Ikes. Then he shudders a little bit and says he's ready to go. Costello knew Derek's phone was filled with self-taken photos, and it wasn't even the perfectly manicured eyebrows and beard that gave it away. Derek shoves the transmission in drive, and Costello looks up at the rosary beads tied around the rearview mirror. Without missing a beat, Costello says, "I've been thinking a lot about heaven and hell." Derek puts the car back in park and chews the candy. He replied back, "So what do you think hell is?" Costello said, "Probably when your cell phone is below 10% battery and you're constantly between charging it and using it." Derek mumbled, "Oof, that is horrifying." Costello let off a cathartic laugh and told Derek he really needed to take in a few more minutes of this house. Derek acquiesced and eventually shuttled him back to the hotel. Costello consoled himself by pretending Jenna was standing in the window.